Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, November the 19th. I would like to acknowledge that I am an ally of Indigenous peoples. The Township of Lucan Biddulph is located on the treaty and traditional territory and ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples and is covered by several Upper Canada treaties. We recognize and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous communities in our shared cultural heritage. Lucan Biddulph is now home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples that have a unique relationship with the land and its resources. These peoples continue to shape the history and economy of the township. Lucan Biddulph recognizes the importance of consulting with our Indigenous neighbors in an effort to build constructive, cooperative relationships through meaningful engagement and to inform our decision-making to build partnerships. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. There's no additions to the agenda. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, for 6.1 quarter revision, Whitfield Drain 2024, part of the assessment.
Thank you very much. Since we last met, we did recognize Remembrance Day, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank and congratulate the Legion on organizing two wonderful public services, as well as their successful poppy campaign. President Kelly O'Connor let me know that the Legion raised in Lucan and Lucan Biddulph $8,105.83 through their poppy campaign. This money goes directly to programs that support our veterans, programs like Cadets Canada, as well as a program that supports homeless veterans called Leave the Streets Behind. The public services held in Granton and Lucan were well attended by many in our community. And we know our Legion is supported by a small but mighty group of volunteers. So to see the success of their efforts certainly does warrant recognition. A reminder that the Legion is open to everyone on Friday and Monday evenings, and on the second Friday of the month, Legion hosts entertainment and meat draws. If you are looking for some fun, I hear that Dart Night on Monday is well attended. It's competitive, but it's fun. Please consider supporting the Legion when you are looking for an evening out. So we don't have to go into closed session, but we do have to enter the Court of Revision. And I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that Council adjourn our regular meeting at 4 minutes after 6 to sit as the Court of Revision under Section 97 of the Drainage Act as amended to consider the Whitfield Drain 2024 and that Mayor Kathy Burkhart-Jessen be appointed as chair. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Reagan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So we have the one drain that's in front of us or for the court tonight, Whitfield Drain. And it is my understanding when I've spoken to staff that no member of the public has registered to speak to their appeal. And a reminder that this court is for the appeal of assessments only. But I will at this time turn it over to Mike DeVos from Spreets, because at the initial meeting for the Whitfield Drain, there was a number of outstanding issues that we kind of sent back to have looked at. So just wondering where we're at with that, Mike.
Yes, we did send a letter in to council for the Court of Revision. One of the things that we were asked to look at was a portion of the watershed in the area of Market Street and Alice Street. In that particular area, some of the landowners felt that some of their water might not go to this drain. And we had done our original watershed based on previous information. So we then had to go out and physically look at the locations, as well as use LiDAR information. Combining those two things, we did find there was a small adjustment in those locations. And so there were a few properties that were added and about 8 properties that were removed. So the line dividing what water would go mostly west towards the Bend drain and what water would go here towards the Whitfield drain was adjusted slightly. And then therefore we had to submit a revised schedule of assessment that takes into account that adjustment to the areas. And in this case, the blocks, there was 2 blocks, one for the block for lands and one for block for roads. So there was a slight adjustment at those 2 roads as well. So the updated schedule has been submitted, and our suggestion is that the court adopt the revised schedule, not the original schedule.
Thank you for that. Jeff, did you have anything further to add to that? No. At this point, I would ask if there's any questions from the court. Okay, then the motion in front of us is that the Court of Revision, having met on behalf of the Whitfield Drain 2024, does hereby adopt the revised drainage assessment schedule dated October 15th, 2024. And that's the right date, right? Is that the right date?
Sorry, what was stated? Yeah. Yes, that's the date
Okay,
of the revised.
yep. As submitted by Spreet Associates. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Then the motion in front of us is that the Court of Revision be closed at 7 minutes after 6 in order to reconvene our regular council meeting. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks for coming, Mike. Okay. Okay, the next up on our agenda is we have to sit as the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn our regular meeting at 8 minutes after 6 in order to sit as the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much. So the first item up on our agenda is an application for, this is an interesting one. I don't recall ever seeing one before, but it's an application for a consent cancellation. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Alyssa. Thanks.
Through the chair to the mayor and members of committee, my name is Alyssa Soldo. I am a planner for Middlesex County, providing my professional planning services tonight for the township of Lucan Biddulph. The purpose of this report before council is to cancel a certificate of consent for lands known as 175 Stanley Street and 177 Walnut Street. The effect of this consent cancellation is to amalgamate these 2 properties back together to its original lot at 175 Stanley Street, as the property owners have decided to not go forward with the development plans of the severed lot at this time. The applicant is seeking to amalgamate 0.38 acres at 177 Walnut Street with 0.41 acres at 175 Stanley Street, which would result in a total lot area of 0.79 acres. The property is located on the east side of Stanley Street on the southeast corner of the intersection of Walnut Street and Stanley Street. The lands are legally described as Plan 340, Part Lot 162, on Registered Plan 33R21184, Part 1 and Part 2, in the township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex, municipally known as 175 Stanley Street and 177 Walnut Street. The lands are currently occupied by a single detached dwelling at the 175 Stanley Street address, and then there's a shop at 177 Walnut Street. As council may recall, this property was subject to a consent application and a temporary zoning bylaw amendment, which were both passed on September 21st of 2021 to allow for the continued existence of the accessory building for up to 3 years on the severed lands of 177 Walnut Street. The intent of the temporary bylaw was to allow that accessory use to remain until the planned construction of a single detached dwelling on the severed lands. And as these plans have changed, the property owners wish to amalgamate their lands to allow the accessory building to remain as a subordinate use to the existing single detached dwelling rather than removing the structure. Both parcels of land are designated settlement area in the county official plan, designated residential in the township of Lucan Biddulph's official plan, and both properties are zoned as residential first density zone in Lucan Biddulph's comprehensive zoning bylaw. And Section 5345 of the Planning Act authorizes the clerk of the municipality to issue a certificate of cancellation, confirming that subsection 5012 of the Planning Act does not apply in respect of the land. And that subsection 53 or 5 applies to a subsequent conveyance or other transaction involving the land, authorizing the lands to remerge while removing their rights to be conveyed without future consent. Planning staff are supportive of the request to remerge these properties into one lot back to its original state. Given the above, I am recommending the application B18-2024 be approved and that a certificate of cancellation be issued and a merger of the two lots occur. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. Any questions from the committee on this? Deputy Mayor Manders.
I'm in favor of this, but I'm just kind of curious. So if we turn this down, then they'd have to tear down the shed at 177, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so it just seems like, it's interesting. I'm just curious, was a strategic move to get to this final point? Was this their intent? I'm just kind of curious. I guess I'll never know, but just interesting. Yeah, it's pretty risky.
Any other comments or questions? So just so I'm clear, so in the event that the property is sold, that it can never be, it can never be another consent to I guess authorized or granted to sever the lands after this, that stays on forever on this lot.
Through the chair, through what I read through the Planning Act, it says removing their rights to be conveyed without further future consent. So they would have to come, they could come again later. Yes.
So it doesn't stop the request from being made in the future should the lands be sold. Okay, interesting. Okay, we have a recommended motion in front of us that as permitted under section 53, subsection 45 of the Planning Act, the clerk be authorized to issue a certificate of cancellation confirming that subsection 5012 of the Planning Act does not apply in respect of the lands legally described as, and I won't read the legal description, Alyssa's done that in her report, and that the subsection 53 or 5 applies to a subsequent conveyance or other transaction involving the land, authorizing the lands to remerge while removing their rights to be conveyed without further future consent. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Westman, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. The next item in front of us is a application for a property on Granton Line. I believe this was discussed at the last council meeting that we met, but I know that there's been a couple updates, so I'll hand it over to you, Alyssa, to walk us through. I assume are you going to walk them through separately or okay. All right, so we'll take the first one and then.
Thank you. The purpose and effect of this report before council is to amend the conditions of consent application B17-2024 based on comments received subsequent to council's decision last month. So as council may recall, a decision was issued for the consent application at the October 5th, 2024 meeting. One condition was missing in the final report that came later. So this amended planning report for B17-2024 has added the condition below under the recommendation section for committee's consideration. The added condition noted as number 10 on the list is concerning land dedication for County Road 59, which is Granton Line. So given the above, I am recommending approval again of the amended consent application subject to the conditions provided in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions on this one, on this? Okay. All right, we have a recommended motion in front of us. It has, as Alyssa said, 10 conditions, 9 of which we discussed at the last planning meeting. And as she referenced, the additional one has to do with the land dedication for the Granton line. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will read just the meat of the motion, but I won't read all the conditions. And anybody interested can refer to the agenda that is posted online. So the motion is that applications for consent B-17/2024 filed by Joan Marie Stilts in order to permit the adjustment of a boundary by conveying 0.3 acres from 34339B Granton Line and adding it to the neighboring parcel at 34399A Granton Line for lots legally described as Plan 257, lots 4 to 6 and part lots 1 to 3. SS Charles RP 33R19422, parts 1 to 6, RP 33R12059, part 6 in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex be granted and subject to the following 10 conditions. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, so the next one deals with the same property. Alyssa.
The purpose and effect of the minor variance application before council is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw to reduce the minimum frontage requirement for the subject property at 34397 Granton Line. The applicant is seeking permission to reduce the minimum lot frontage to 7.6 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a minimum lot frontage of 15 meters. The subject property is a 1-acre parcel situated on the west side of Granton Line, southwest of the intersection at Fallon Drive and Granton Line. The lands are legally described as Plan 257, lots 4 to 6, and part lots 1 to 3, SS Charles RP 33R19422, parts 1 to 6, on RP 33R12059, part 6, in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex, municipally known now as 34397 Granton Line. The property is occupied by an existing single detached dwelling and small shed. The lands are designated settlement area in the County of Middlesex official plan and residential in the township's official plan. Additionally, the lands are zoned residential first density, which permits a single unit dwelling and home occupation. The lands are surrounded by residential and agricultural uses. As council may recall, this minor variance was a condition of the consent application B-17/2024. I have reviewed the application against the 4 tests of the Planning Act. As indicated in the report, I am satisfied that the requested minimum lot frontage would not cause negative impacts to this property or adjacent properties, as it was already existing for the driveway as access, and it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. No comments were received from the public during the circulation process. A comment was provided by Middlesex County Emergency Services, which reiterates the comments provided in the previous consent application concerning 911 addresses. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority provided a comment that they have no objections or requirements for this application. And the Lucan Biddulph Building Division also made a comment that they have no objection to the proposed frontage. As such, I am recommending approval of minor variance application A9/2024, subject to the conditions stated in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this one? Okay. So we have a recommended motion in front of us. Again, it is fairly lengthy, and anybody can find it online. Alyssa did a good job of describing it in her report, but the recommendation is that the application for the minor variance be granted. And of course, it's subject to the following condition, and that is the same condition about the county road, the Granton line. 13 meters be dedicated to that. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. The next application in front, just lost it. The next application in front of us is, sorry, It is a minor variance application for a property on Saintsbury Line. And at this point, I think Dan is taking us through the application.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks, Chair and members of the committee. For those that don't know me, I'm Dan Fitzgerald, Manager of Planning with Middlesex County, and here tonight providing professional planning services for Lucan Biddulph. So the purpose and effect of this particular application, being minor variance A 8/2024, is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it does relate to the maximum lot coverage, minimum unit area, as well as minimum unit frontage requirements, specific to a medium density block that is located within phase 1 of the draft plan approved Timber Ridge subdivision. So the subject lands as a whole consist of a 3.44 hectare, 8.5 acre block within the existing Timber Ridge draft plan approved subdivision. This subdivision was originally approved, received draft plan approval as well as zoning approval on January 17th, 2023. It did contemplate the creation of 60 lots for single detached dwellings kind of surrounding this site, as well as this block here that we're discussing tonight, which was intended for medium density development. So the zoning bylaw provided provisions for development of this particular subject parcel, such as frontage requirements for the individual units, the lot coverage, as well as lot area minimums, as well as setbacks and others. At the time of review, the developer did provide a concept site plan for council to consider as part of the proposed medium density block in the format of single-story townhouse dwellings. So while the concept plan did show 54 units, I would just note that the existing zoning does not cap the site at 54 units. So what is the specific variance that's being proposed tonight? Perfect. So in this particular case, the plan that has been provided by the developer shows 59 townhouse units spread across the entirety of the medium density block. We've gone ahead and taken the liberties of highlighting those particular units that would be affected by the requested minor variance. So in total, there are 16 units that are affected by the proposed minor variances. So they are requesting a reduction to the minimum lot area for those 16 units from 350 square meters to 325.9 square meters. So that equates to a reduction of essentially 24 square meters per lot. They're also seeking a reduction to the minimum lot frontage from 11 meters to 10 meters, so a reduction of 1 meter. And they are requesting an increase to the maximum lot coverage for those particular units. And that's from 55% lot coverage to 56%. So an effect of 1 additional percent. So as noted, the variance would only apply to those interior units as highlighted in yellow on the plan. And I did ask the developer's consultant, Connor Wilkes, who's here with us tonight as well, to provide kind of an idea as to what those units will look like. And I was assured that the general plan in this particular instance is similar to other developments that the landowner has completed in this particular case. One being close by to Lucan Biddulph here is located in Elsa Craig. And what it is they're 1-story townhouse dwelling units. So very much different from, previous proposals that we've seen for townhouse units within Lucan. I would note that the existing lot sizes, even with the requested minor variances, are more than double the size that we've seen in previous medium density developments within Lucan. So the lands are designated urban settlement area in the county's official plan. They are residential in the township's official plan. And they are zoned a site-specific residential third density exception 12 zone, which also includes a site-specific holding provision. So we did receive a number of comments as part of the public circulation of the application. The comments did range from concerns surrounding the amount of density that's proposed by the development to more site-specific concerns pertaining to fencing as well as screening from the existing residential neighborhood. Concerns have also been raised about the compact form of development and comparisons between other medium density sites, as I had noted earlier. I have had quite a few conversations with various individuals, and I have addressed a number of the concerns with local residents where it was possible. It was noted that fencing would be required at the periphery of the development where the lands abut existing as well as proposed low-density residential lots. Additionally, staff will seek enhanced landscaping to further buffer the proposed visitor parking stall area from the existing residential lot to the northwest. In review of the requested variances, I do find that they are generally in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw as well as the township's official plan. And they are considered an appropriate use of the site, being medium density residential, as well as minor in nature specific to the impact experienced by the development. And so, given the above, I am recommending approval of the minor variance, subject to the conditions that the variances only apply to those 16 units as identified in the planning report. Additionally, there is another condition I would note that planning is seeking, and that being that the units shall not exceed 1 story in height. So with that said, I am recommending approval subject to those conditions, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. We'll go to questions from the committee and then I'll open it up to questions from the public. If there's any initial questions from the committee. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Dan, just wanted to clarify a couple of things. You said the lot sizes were double typically what we see in the community?
Yeah, so through the chair, I had a really good conversation actually with a resident yesterday, which kind of prompted me to go back and check what our existing medium density standards are for other alternative sites that we've seen already built in Lucan. Primarily those being, well, not entirely constructed yet, but we do have the Asable Fields townhouse development that's currently being constructed now. And then the other main examples, the Ridge Crossing townhomes that we see as well. So in those site specific zones, the minimum lot areas are around 160 square meters. And frontages are about 6.1 meters. So what we're seeing as a product example of the provisions on this site is much larger. So we're seeing a minimum size in most cases of 11 meters, where the variance for those 16 specific units are requesting a reduction to 10.1. So still quite a bit larger than what we've seen in the past. And then in terms of the actual lot size, the unit size, that's where that 160 to 325 or 350. So I would say it's a much different style of development that we've seen in the past. They're 1 story, which generally equates to larger lots, which generally leads to a less intensified development at the end of the day, is what I would say.
May I ask another? Thank you. So I'm looking at the site plan map, page 2, and they have the temporary swim facility, the swim pond. Am I correct in assuming that with that design, there's fewer units?
Yeah, so through the chair, there's certainly some background engineering that's going on with respect to the entirety of the subdivision as a whole. So we did see in the second attachment on the concept site plan as provided by the developer, the kind of the 8 units, if you're looking plan view, I guess it's east on the actual plan. Those 8 units in the top corner are conceptually shown as a temporary storm pond. So there would effectively be 51 units realized off the get-go, assuming that those 8 units are a storm pond for the interim. And then it's potential that that storm pond could eventually be removed should the regional storm facility be constructed on the township lands, which could then be potentially converted into that 8 additional units. So the immediacy, I would say, is that you could realize that 51 units if that storm pond is there. Once the storm pond is removed, they could add that 8 additional. So that's where you're getting from the 51 to the 59 total units that they're requesting.
Thank you. Thanks. I just have one more. So if I remember correctly, the original design, they had units that were right on Saintsbury, like backed right on. And I knew that was a concern for people. Does this second design, this one we're looking at here, does that change that in any way?
Yeah, so through the chair, as you can kind of see, what the developer has done is created almost a loop street around the site, what we would call in the planning engineering world, a window street onto Sainsbury, which it no longer creates backlotting within the Sainsbury line corridor. So I guess you're saying, why is that important? From a planning perspective, we would much rather see the fronts of units facing onto Sainsbury line instead of a backyard and a fence. And what the whole theory is more eyes on the street. So that gives us a public presence within the Sainsbury line corridor, creates a more active presence environment for pedestrians to utilize that space. So the plan that we're seeing now, being a more efficient design, creates that natural space along Sainsbury to have the eyes and that connection from the private site to the public realm. So I would say it more so follows the good planning, design, and practices for urban design within our context. That makes sense.
Right, it does. Thank you. I might have another one later. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just a comment and then a question. I'm glad we're going to hold it to a one floor. I'm glad to hear that. I do think the intent, what was presented before to this is not that extreme. I think it'd be very extreme if it was going to high density 2-story, kind of just like we're seeing at Asable Fields and then down from Sainsbury. So that's good to see. This product is needed in Lucan. I mean, there seems to be a lot of interest in 1-floor condos, so it is good to see. And again, it's not too far off what was presented. I guess my only question is, there's kind of a clubhouse, or there's something, is that the bottom of private road C? Is that where that is?
Yeah, so through the chair, the existing zoning on site does require a certain square footage of amenity space, private amenity space, for in a communal sense. And it was always the intent of the developer, even in the original concept plans provided, that they would provide a clubhouse for this style of development that they were intending. So in this particular case, they are showing that common public amenity space for the development facing that window street area on Sainsbury.
And that has to be maintained for that can't be changed to units or something. That is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so through the chair, because they have that requirement built into the zoning that they have to meet, I think it's 1,350 square meters of common amenity space. They wouldn't be able to remove that. No.
Gotcha. Oh, no, it looks, I was gonna say one more thing right now. Okay, nope, thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? I'm going to go to the committee, and then I'm going to go to the applicant and public, and then I'll come back for further. Okay. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I just wanted to ask, is there any technical reason for why these variances are required? Is there something that's driving that in particular?
Yeah, so through the chair, from a technical perspective, I may defer that to the applicant to answer.
Did you want to come up, Connor? So Connor Wilkes is here on behalf of the applicant. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of committee. My name is Connor Wilkes. I'm a planner with Dillon Consulting. I'm here tonight representing the developers of the Timber Ridge subdivision. And first, I just want to thank Dan and Alyssa with their help on this file. I will note that I support the recommendation being brought forward in front of the committee tonight. I'm available for further questions from the committee or public, and I'll jump into Councillor Hodgins' question. So, yeah, from a technical perspective, no, but the reason that these minor variances are being brought forward tonight is because this is an existing product that the developers have built in other municipalities, and they've found that these products have been successful and have been moving on the market. So instead of going back to the drawing board and creating new floor plans and elevations and building permit packages, they for efficiency reasons, they wanted to maintain these products that have moved elsewhere. So that's why it's being reflected in the minor variance tonight.
Thank you for that. And just looking at the site plan and maybe something that may be driving this as well. I see that it looks like the road widths are 9 meters, and just wanted to ask if that's wider than typical, or if these are pretty standard for this type of site. Or is that that width to achieve on-street parking?
Through you, Madam Mayor. In terms of the road width, so I can't fully speak to it because I wasn't involved in the initial design and layout of the site. I believe 9 meters is likely a little larger than the standard within a private condo development. So the initial parking requirements are still being met through garage and driveways, and then the visitor parking areas.
Yeah, through the chair, maybe I'll just jump in a little bit. So, I totally agree with you, and that's like typically when you see these private sites, we're seeing anywhere from 6.7 to 7 meter private road widths. And that's the exact issue that we're seeing in these private site developments is that the complaint from residents is it's just too small, it's too tight. So I believe the clientele that the developer is intending to go after is kind of the reason for the increase in the design size. It's not to accommodate on-street parking. At the end of the day, these will all be fire lanes. You won't be able to park on the road. But it's more so a design consideration for the end user to create not such a congested site at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from council at this point? Connor, did you have anything to add at this stage?
Through you, Mayor. Nothing further.
And then to members of the public, did anybody have any comments or questions or clarifications that you want either from our planner or from the applicant's planner? Sheila, you're gonna have to come up. And just remember to state, even though we all know you,
Yes.
for the record, state your
My
name and
name
your
is Sheila
address.
Hodgins and I live part of lot 28 Saintsbury Line. So I just have one concern, well, two concerns. One of them is the east side of my house where the parking lot is going. So that faces my backyard and my whole backyard is full of windows. So I would like to have on record that I would request a board-on-board fence behind the parking lot, in front of the parking lot. So that's one request. And then the other one was on the south side where the houses are, their backyards are facing my white fence. My house is surrounded by a white fence. And so I would like to see or put a request in for a board-on-board fence there. I did put that in my letter and I did say about a bathing suit hanging on my white fence. And I can see that happening. So I would request a board-on-board. Can I request that?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think that's all
Okay.
that I have. I could think the development will be great for Lucan. Lucan needs senior condos. And a lot of my friends are waiting to have it built, and me too. Yeah, so, but not for a bit, for me. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you. Oh, and that's my.
So if the fence goes up and there's a bathing suit, we'll know it's your bathing suit hanging
Yes,
on the.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Connor, did you have a response to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Ms. Hodgins, just to provide her with some comfort, the intentions of the developer is to have a wood fence surrounding the perimeter of the site, except for the window street on Sainsbury where, as Dan mentioned, more eyes on the development. So yeah, wood fence around the perimeter.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from the public at this point? Okay, I'll go back to the committee. Councillor Regan.
So just a couple of other questions I had is, well, just wondering where the connectivity is for the trail. Because I know there was an issue with that. I didn't see that. The other thing is there, and I guess I'm going to ask I can ask the representative for the developers, is this going to be geared to 55 and over, 60 and over That's the other question. And if so, and I understand there's no parking on the street, but when you have elderly, if you're going to, if the target is happens to be people who are older, it could be anybody, but I'm just saying if that was the target with one floor, I mean, I live on one floor and I'm grateful for that, but I don't see sidewalks or anything like that. So I'm just wondering about that.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So yes, the intentions are for this to be also 55 and over, more of a empty nester kind of, don't want to call it retirement community, but intended for older individuals. And then going back to the question from Councillor Hodgins, so the larger road widths, again, I know that there's no individual sidewalks with larger road widths. There's, you know, pedestrian connectivity through there. And then in through the proposed sidewalk of phase 1 of the subdivision.
Right. And sorry, and the trail, the connecting the trail that we're eventually going to have miles and miles of it. I'm just wondering if that's been considered with the designs. at the
Yes,
back.
through the chair.
Oh.
I just know that's kind of outside the scope of the minor variance application,
okay,
but
yeah,
something
sure.
we would
Okay, yeah.
certainly review and require as part of the site plan application.
No, thank you. It doesn't hurt to bring it up. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council at this time or the committee at this time? Just even though we've gotten the intention on the wood fence, is the fencing something that's dealt though at site plan? That's when that would be confirmed. So that's not a public process, but certainly the comments made would carry on through that process, correct?
Yeah, so through the chair, yes, absolutely. So as part of the municipality's design standard, we would typically require board-on-board fencing for when medium density development abuts existing lower density or commercial developments.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, if there's not any other comments from the committee. Okay, then we do have a recommended motion in front of us. It is fairly lengthy, but I will read it. That the application for minor variance A/8/2024 filed by Connor Wilkes on behalf of 2219260 Ontario Inc. for relief from the Township of Lucan Biddulph Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw to permit the construction townhouse units with a minimum lot frontage of 10 meters, minimum lot area of 325.9 meters squared, and a maximum lot coverage of 56.3% for a property legally described as part of lots 27 and 28, concession 5, in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex, also known as Timber Ridge Subdivision Phase 1, be granted subject to the following conditions: that the lot area reduction shall only apply to units 2 through 6 and 15 through 18 and 43, as shown on the attached site plan, and that lot coverage increase shall only apply to units 2 through 6, 15 to 18, 38 to 40, and 46 to 48, as shown on the attached site plan. And further, that the lot frontage shall only apply to units 2 through 6, 15 to 18, and 43, as shown on the attached site plan. And further, that the townhouse dwelling units shall not exceed 1 story in height. And the reasons as they are outlined, as Dan highlighted in his report, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, and now I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn our Committee of Adjustment at 6:45 to reconvene our regular council meeting. Mover and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And I'll say to the members of the public, thank you for attending. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We've got some interesting things ahead of us, but certainly we'll understand if you pop out. So we do have a delegation tonight, and at this point, I'm pleased to welcome Daryl Abbs, who is a managing partner with Watson and Associates, and he is going to present to us our water and wastewater rate study. So Daryl, thank you for joining us. I'll let you get settled and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So I'll be going through a brief presentation which summarizes the findings of the water and wastewater rate study and financial plan exercise that we've been undertaking over the last few months. Next slide, please. And so the intent of the water and wastewater rate study, obviously, is to calculate the required water and wastewater rates that the township will need over the next 10 years. So as part of that, we need to identify all the current and future capital needs for both the water and wastewater systems. We need to identify how we're going to fund or finance those capital needs. We need to, as well, estimate what the future operating costs are going to be over the next 10 years. And then we incorporate all that information into the rate calculation. In addition to the calculations, we also took a review of the existing rate structure. And I have a slide or two on that to explain some recommendations we have coming out of that review. And then as well, looking at some user fees that are implemented in neighboring communities. Next slide, please. So in terms of timelines, we started this process back in June of 2024. We worked with staff between July and October to prepare the calculations and the analysis. And I want to take a moment to thank township staff for their assistance in providing all the detailed information that's required. We've prepared the water and wastewater rate study report and the water financial plan report, and those are attached to the council agenda. And we're here this evening presenting the information. Next slide. Thank you. So when we're preparing the water and wastewater rates, one thing we always have to keep in mind is the extensive amount of legislation since the Walkerton crisis. And really, there's some pieces of legislation that are fully enforced, partially enforced, but really the main principle that we take from this is that the water and wastewater systems, from a financial perspective, should ensure the principle of full cost recovery. So we include all of the costs required to not only operate the system, maintain it, expand it, and make sure that we incorporate the new requirements for asset management that came out in 2015 under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. Next slide, please. So with respect to your current water and wastewater rates, you can see there's a number of categories under the base charges, and this is in part why we are reviewing the rate structure approach. So you have a base charge for your typical residential, rural, commercial, industrial customers. You have a capital levy charge, a fixed charge on top of that as well. And then you have these miscellaneous 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit, et cetera, number of unit charges. And these are base charges that apply to structures with multiple residential units. We'll talk a little bit about the approaches and our rate structure review a little bit later in the presentation, but this is a very unique approach that we don't typically see across the province. So that's why I think it was part of the review to take a look at the structure. In addition to the fixed charges, we have the volume charges, which are imposed on a per cubic meter basis. Next slide, please. So with respect to the number of customers, you can see most of the customers fall into that first category. In total, you're looking at just under 1,700 water customers and just under 1,600 wastewater customers. Next slide, please. And so as part of this review, what we need to do is we need to take a look at the costs and divide them by the volumes to come up with the rate. But what we want to do is incorporate the township's planned growth that's set out in the development charges background study and other planning documents. And so what we're looking at is growing from about 1,700 customers to just under 2,150 customers for water. And if we scroll down just a little bit, you can see the volumes go from about 330,000 cubic meters annually to about just over 400,000 cubic meters annually. Next slide. Similarly, with wastewater, we're looking at increasing the customers from about 1,600 customers today to just over 2,000 customers by the end of the 10-year period, and just under 300,000 cubic meters of volume, increasing to just under 375,000 cubic meters of volume. Next slide, please. So with respect to the capital needs, so when we're looking at what projects do we need to fund over the next 10 years, we took a look at a number of pieces of information. So the current capital budget, the 2023 development charge background study, which sets out the growth related infrastructure, as well as the township's 2022 asset management plan. And I mentioned that Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, as part of the requirements of that piece of legislation, come next year, you'll have to show how you're financially planning for the replacement of all your assets. And so we've incorporated that principle here into the analysis. Next slide, please. And so to summarize the water capital expenditures, if we scroll down just a little bit, we have a total of just over $4 million in capital expenditures. And you can see the bulk of that is that life cycle or the asset management requirements. And next slide. Now, for the wastewater analysis, what we did was we looked at two different scenarios. There's a large capital expenditure in the Lucan wastewater treatment plant expansion. And so what we did was we wanted to look at it if we constructed that in 2025 to 2027. And then the second scenario is if we constructed that later in the forecast. And so you can see here we have just over just under $23 million in capital expenditures for wastewater, including that treatment plant expansion. And if we scroll down to the next slide, we have pretty close to the same amount of expenditures, just a slightly different number due to the asset management calculations we did. So around $23 million is what we're looking at in terms of funding for wastewater. Next slide, please. So there's really only a few financing sources that you have. You can use your existing reserves, development charges for the expansion or the growth related costs. You can use debt, and you can use operating budget transfers, which is really as part of the rates. You take some of that money and put it into the bank accounts to pay for the capital. As well, if there are grants available, then you can apply those. Or if there are capital charges under the Municipal Act, you could apply those as well. Next slide. And so looking at your current reserves, just as a starting point, how much money do you have in the bank account? You can see for water, just over $1.16 million in the capital reserve. And you can see nominal amounts in the development charge reserve funds. For wastewater, you have just under $3 million in your capital reserve, and then about $500,000 in the Lucan Urban DC Reserve Fund, and then a nominal amount in the Granton Urban DC Reserve Fund. And I'll come back to why that's important, because it sounds like a lot of money, but when we're taking a look at the expenditures and we're talking about $23 million in wastewater expenditures, that money doesn't go that far. And so here's kind of the summary of the proposed financing approach. When we're looking at water, funding that all from the capital reserve. And when we're looking at wastewater, it's a combination of development charge reserve funds, growth related debentures or debt. And that's in about the range of $14 to $16 million, depending on the scenario. And then the remainder would come from the capital reserve. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned the asset management plan requirements. Again, this is coming through a separate piece of legislation, so we definitely need to make sure that we incorporate this into the analysis. Looking at the asset management plan, you have about $84 million worth of linear water infrastructure and about just over $4 million in water facilities. And for wastewater, you have about $56 million in assets, and then just over $14 million for wastewater facilities. So you can see, again, looking at your existing reserve funds and understanding that at some point you will have to replace this infrastructure. It is a significant amount. So the asset management plan identified For water, the linear water assets, you should be putting aside about $400,000 every year for the asset management requirements. And for the linear wastewater, just under $400,000 a year. And then for wastewater facilities, another $285,000. So this information has been incorporated into the capital budget analysis. So it's included in the rate calculation. Next slide, please. When we're looking at your operating budgets, so starting with your current operating budget, we forecast out for the 10-year period. Typically, we use 2% for inflation and 5% for inflation for things like hydro, utilities, chemicals. Those tend to increase faster. I know in this world of high inflation, we've seen it a lot higher than 2%. It is coming down, and so we think it is going to normalize into the future at around that 2-3%. So looking at this graph, really what this shows is a breakdown of how much of the operating costs are going to the capital related components, which is transfers to your bank accounts to then pay for the capital expenditures, and how much is really the pure operating cost. So the pure operating cost is in blue, and then the capital related is in red. And you can see they kind of steadily increase with inflation over time. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at wastewater, so scenario 1, you can see early on in the process, those capital expenditures jump up, and that's due to the treatment plant expansion. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that that red jump is later in the forecast. And so the rates and the transfers we're making to pay for the debentures are occurring later in the forecast. Okay, so really just showing you what this looks like graphically, taking those numbers and showing them with pictures, which is sometimes nice. So one of the other things we took a look at was a review of other fees and charges imposed in other municipalities and neighboring municipalities. And so you'll see in the report, we did a survey of these fees and charges. And based on a number of your comparators, we noticed that these were common fees that were not imposed in the township. And so an application fee, if you're looking for a connection to the water system, there would be an application fee for that. If there's you're requiring or requesting your meter to be read in addition to the normal course of business, there could be a fee for that. If there's any tampering with the meter, it's called a fee, but it's more like a fine. And then similarly with the unauthorized operation of a fire hydrant fee, same thing. So those are common fees imposed in other municipalities in the area. So now taking a look at the rate structure, okay, I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, yours is a unique rate structure. And so taking a look at the best practices across Ontario, and our firm does about 1/3 of the rate studies for municipalities across Ontario that have water and wastewater rate studies. And so the most common approach is to have, similar to what you have, is a fixed base charge and then a volume charge to recover the rest of the revenues. Typically, the base charge should try to recover about 25% of your operating costs in a given year to give you that sustainable source of revenue, and then the remainder could be recovered from the volume rate. And so what we did was we looked at, again, kind of the best practices, and most municipalities will have different base charges based on the size of the meter that goes into the property. And so those larger, miscellaneous 58 unit buildings most likely have a larger meter, a 3-inch meter, for example. And so they would fall under that category. And so you can see we can simplify the number of categories down from, about 10 or so down into these categories, which is, again, consistent with other municipalities across Ontario. And so the way that we established the relationship of how much we should charge each of these different categories is based on the American Water Works Association textbook or paper on rate setting. And so in there, they have established ratios for different meter sizes in terms of how much volume is used by the different meter sizes. And so using those ratios, we have that relationship between the different meter sizes for which we can impose the charge. I think historically, the relationship is different, and over time it's evolved. And so now we can say that the relationship is based on these principles set out in the American Water Works Association guidelines. Next slide, please. So in terms of the rate calculations, what we've prepared in terms of the water charges is that we were keeping the base charge, that fixed charge, the same. And so we weren't anticipating to increase that over the forecast. And then we would increase the volume charge at about 6% per year. And so I mentioned that the American Water Works Association generally says you should try to recover about 25% of your cost from the base charge, the rest from the volume charge. Right now, you're recovering a lot more than that from the base charge. And so if we keep the base charge the same, increase the volume charge, then we can start to get closer to that kind of guideline. That also gives the users of the system some ability to control how much they pay in their bills. But if they want to use less water, they want to water the lawn less, they can pay a little bit less. In terms of wastewater, again, we have those two scenarios. If we construct the treatment plant expansion earlier on in the process, we'd be looking at, and this is the base charge and the volume charge, 5% annual increases from 2025 to 2027, then 4% in 28, and then 2% thereafter. Or if we decide to push that out to later in the process, so construct that expansion in 2030, the rate increases would be 4% per year from 2025 to 2030, and then 2% thereafter. So not a big difference, but a little bit of a difference there. So if we're looking at the 2025 proposed rates, you can see the different base charges, and this is shown on the monthly basis here. So the typical residential property would pay that $30.52 per month. And as you go up into the largest meter size, it would be $488.32 per month. The volume charge would be 88 cents per cubic meter. And if you are purchasing bulk water, it's $2.44 per cubic meter. Next slide, please. On the wastewater side of things, you can see the 2025 rates are fairly similar, and they're set out here very similar to the water rates. Next slide, please. So what we tried to do, and I know there's a lot of numbers going on in this table here, but what we tried to do is show that, and sorry, I'm a numbers guy, so I love spreadsheets, but yes, I know it's a lot. So what we try to do here is to show you, well, let's add up all of your charges. So the base charge for water, the volume charge for water, the base charge for wastewater, volume charge for wastewater. And what's your total bill going to be? So that we can see for a typical residential property that uses 170 cubic meters a year, what would their bill be and what is it going to look like into the future? Now, you'll see going to 2025, it actually decreases. Now, this is in part because we're adjusting the rate structure for the base charge. And so for the residential category, it actually decreases slightly. And then you can see those increases that we talked about, 4%, 3%, and then 2% overall. So when we talked about, 6% increase in the volume charge for water, but 0% increase for the base charge, and we talked about the wastewater increases, overall, in total, we're looking at 4% for 2026, then 3% for 27, and then just 2%, which follows inflation thereafter. So really not large, not substantial increases at all. Next slide, please. So for the financial plan, so that kind of summarizes the rate study. And you'll see there's those two reports in the council agenda. Now, the financial plan is required as part of your submission to for your license to operate your water system. And so you're required to do this. And really, to boil it all down, is if we take that rate study information and what we've done, and again, if you like spreadsheets, in the back of that report, there's a lot of spreadsheets. We've shown on a cash flow basis what the operating costs are, what your reserve balances are, what your expenditures are going to be. What the financial plan does is that it takes all that information, does some accounting work to it, and then looks at it on a forward-looking financial statements. So it really just translates that information into the format that the province requires. So there's really no different information in between these two reports, just a different way to present it. So if we go to the next slide, and we go to the next slide, and we go to the next slide, that really just summarizes the requirements for the financial plan. This information's here if you really want to get into the details, if you're curious, which really shows the specific differences between the rate study and the financial plan. But again, they're the same document, just shown in accounting versus cash flow basis. So lastly, just want to finish off with kind of where your water wastewater rates kind of put you in with respect to your neighboring communities. And since that first year for the typical residential user, the rate would decrease slightly. You'll see the relative position wouldn't change. Again, you're in somewhere in the middle, top end of the middle range of your rates. And so again, no significant increases forecasted. I think the township's in a good financial position with the way that you've been saving up historically. And so we don't see the need for significant rate increases in the future. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, Gerald. Yes, lots of numbers and lots of information, but certainly appreciate the time that you've taken to walk us through it, and perhaps make it more understandable to the lay person. Questions, comments from council. Deputy Mayor Manders, please.
I guess for anybody watching this, I'll probably ask Jeff if I'm correct in clarifying this. I just don't want them to be misled on the increases in the terminology of expansion. The expansion is not causing the increase. It's at the time of the expansion, we're doing improvements to the existing infrastructure that we all love and use. And that is what the increase is to current users. Again, the expansion is going to be done by future growth and development charges. So I didn't feel that I was laid out that good there. So for anyone watching, I wanted to make sure people aren't freaking out because of the expansion. It's because of the improvements.
And maybe I can just, yeah, that's a very good point. So in this case, we have to look at all the costs and all the revenues. So we did touch on that there is development charges built into the revenue side. And in the more in-depth analysis, you will see where those numbers are in the overall plan. But you're exactly right. So there is a percentage that we do have an existing plant that is being replaced. There is existing infrastructure that is being replaced. And those numbers were given to us by BM Ross as part of the expansion. And those numbers then were transferred to Watson Associates to know what the percentage is for rebuilding of the plant and what is meant to go towards growth.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for your report. I just wanted to ask about back on slide number 6 is water users forecast. And you've got an increase of new growth in 400. You've got in 2024 is an increase of 15, I guess, for new growth, and then 453, and that's a period of 10 years. And I'm just wondering where you got that number, because that's like really, to me, it seems really low. Like over 10 years, you're only like I would suspect it would be a lot higher than that. So I'm just wondering how that might affect your forecasting here.
So through the mayor, we utilize the development charges background study forecast. So that growth forecast informed our forecast here. And the way that we approach this to ensure that we're not overestimating the customers, because the customers, the volumes are the denominator in the calculation. If we overestimate that, we're not going to collect enough money to fund the system. And so typically our approach is we only include the residential forecast. We don't include any assumption on additional non-residential development. So just residential forecast. And that provides us a conservative approach to ensure that we're collecting enough revenue for the system.
Can I just
Yes,
jump
absolutely.
on that? Just because if you're using the numbers from the recent development charge study and the growth projections there, we know under the new PPS that new numbers are supposed to be used when forecasting growth in our communities. And I think we're led to believe that those numbers are generous. So, but in keeping with what you're saying, to err on the side of being conservative as opposed to over speculating how fast growth will ultimately benefit the system, right? Okay, great, thanks. Did you have anything else?
I had another one.
Okay.
The other, well, you mentioned, and I was going to go to slide 21. So the American Water Works Association ratios. Is that, I'm just asking, is that not private industry as opposed to public industry? Is it, because I always thought, that's what I thought was the American one, just more, it has a more of a private, when they privatize their water. Is that the model they use? And that if it is, how does that fit to municipality?
So through the mayor, so the textbook or the report, I guess it is a textbook that the American Water Works Association puts out is for rate setting for utilities. And so it is for public entities. It could be used for private entities, but it is also used for public entities as well. It's something commonly referred to in the municipal sector for different principles on rate setting. And so, when it's talking about the ratios of the meter sizes, so these different meter sizes, the ratios are based on how much flow would theoretically be able to go through each of these different meter sizes. So, even if it was related to private industry, it would still be applicable in this instance, because we're really just trying to get at how much usage is a 3/4 inch meter using relative to a 3-inch meter. And using those ratios, we're able to apply the costs to those different meter sizes in that manner.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you, I have a couple questions and comments. I guess I was surprised on slide 25 where you have the forecast of the 10 years. So, there are very, I think, modest increases. So I was surprised because I think sometimes with these exercises, there's a lot of capital works and then you get some pretty shocking numbers. So I guess that's good news for us. I wanted to ask if there was any, if there's any consideration for a stormwater charge for our stormwater assets, or alternatively, how are we funding that infrastructure?
So through you, Madam Mayor, perhaps I'll pass that over to Jeff.
Yeah, through the mayor. So at this juncture, it was a consideration to include that in here, but that would be a change that I would get some direction from council before we wanted to go to that step. So no, that was not included in this study. That would be more of a discussion I'd like to have with council before we integrated that. I would just say that we will have to update. We generally update these every 5 years. So that after going through the Whitfield drain would be a really good discussion whether we want to implement a stormwater utility rate for the next time we do this. And I would suggest, like, obviously we're going to redo this in 5 years, that could be the main thrust of the next review.
Okay, good. Yep.
Somebody drive the G4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking at table 4-3 in the report, which is a capital budget forecast. And especially on the water side, I guess it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of water capital projects or the capital needs over the 10-year forecast. It surprised me that was such a low number at only $4 million. And maybe it's a question to staff. or just, don't we have any more, infrastructure renewal projects in that 10-year forecast? I just see Harold Court on there, but just wondering about other streets that we had on the horizon, like Nicolai and others.
Yeah, through the mayor. Yeah, actually, and this is going back a number of years that Lucan has and Biddulph have done a good job at planning the bad spots in our water system. So it does look like there is not a lot coming up, but there is technically we're catching up. There is a couple of spots that are we're keeping an eye on. We would have to review if we update our asset management plan. But at this time, we've determined that, yeah, the Harold Court area is the couple ones that we have. We do have a couple of items that are on the horizon, such as water meter replacement and water tower painting. But those are, as we are collecting capital for upkeep on some of our, infrastructure and that sort of thing. I didn't want to start trying to find projects to put in here, even though we're keeping up and doing a good job. So to Councillor Hodgins' direct question is, yeah, no, that's our asset management plan and we've been following it. Water Street's coming up. We still have to finish. It was supposed to be a 2024. So we did account for the 2024 numbers there, even though it'll be done in 2025. That's our last big street. We have a couple of small little sections we're going to keep an eye on.
And through the mayor, so that line in that table that says savings for life cycle replacement, we have just over $400,000 a year. That should take care of those additional unexpected projects. And so since the asset management plan says to set aside or spend that much money every single year so that you can rehabilitate your system, that line item would be used. And whether you have a project in a year, then you can use that money that we've set aside in the analysis. If you don't have a project in any given year, that money can go into the reserve and then can be spent the next year when you've identified that project. So I feel like we have captured the cost by incorporating those life cycle expenditures in there.
Thank you for that. We're just kind of going through our budget process for 2025 now, and I wanted to ask whether we're looking at some pretty large expenses for asset management plan updates, and I wanted to know if that was something that we could be funded through rates or not.
So through the mayor, yeah, I mean, your asset management plan, you could prorate the asset management plan. Whether you do it in part, if you do, let's say, just water and wastewater, yeah, you could fund that through the rates. It is related to water and wastewater. If you do a comprehensive asset management plan, which looks at all services, you could prorate that the cost for that asset management plan and apply some of that to water and wastewater if you chose to. It's really up to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one more question. I'm getting back to my first comment there that they are pretty modest or low rate increases. Just wanted to know, theoretically, can council put the rates higher just to provide more reserves or just to have more contingency for unforeseen projects or expenses? Or are we locking, or should we more be following the rate study?
Through the mayor, you can. That's your prerogative to council could determine that, you know what, we need to save a little bit more in the reserves. We don't think it's aggressive enough to, based on what was identified in the analysis. We want to make sure that we're not having these unexpected concerns or issues. So, yep, council could choose to have a different rate increase through the budget process for sure.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Abs.
I was just more to that point. I was just wondering if those rates that we have, the rates that we're talking about, is that going to provide us? Are we on the right track for our reserves? I guess my question is to Ron.
I might jump
Oh,
in
okay, sure.
in that I believe that a more formal staff report is coming back to council in December.
Okay.
And so maybe that sort of question will be answered at that time.
Did not know that. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
but-
Okay.
Yep.
good.
Yep. So through the mayor as well, in the rate study, and I guess it's on page 235. It starts at 235 of the agenda. You'll see we actually do reserve fund continuity schedules. And so based on the rate increases that we've identified, the transfers into those reserves, we've identified what the projected balance would be in the reserves each year over the forecast. So for the capital reserve, for example, for water, it's targeted at the end of this year to have $900,000, $911,000, increasing to about 1.4 million by the end of the forecast. Right. And that includes, we have $4 million in the capital program for asset management. If you don't spend that in a given year, 400,000, that's going to go into the reserve. So that will increase that by another 400,000. So it based on the budget annually that you're going to go through, as well as this kind of forecasted plan that we've identified here, should give you a sense of if you feel that there's enough money in those reserves.
Any other questions or comments from council? Just a couple things. Thank you very much for the report. This is the first time we've ever gone through such a comprehensive, detailed rate study. And to Councillor Hodgins' point, I honestly, I think I was maybe a little nervous as to what you were going to come back with. So to have the numbers flesh out as they have, I think, congratulations has to go to staff in past years in being able to forecast appropriately. And I think that this report bears witness of that. A couple things though, and understanding that why in 2025 we see that, negative percentage change because of how we're trying to flip to a more recognizable model of how we fund this. You're going to tell me that the forecasting that being negative and a negative or a decrease in 2025 isn't going to negatively impact us in the years to come. But is there something that we should be concerned about, or is there something that we could do different? Even just because I think maybe for the average user of the system to see that they may not fully comprehend why that is.
Yeah, so I think one thing we'll have to keep in mind is that if we're flipping the rate structure for the base charge and it's going down for some users, that means it's going up for others, right? And so for the typical residential or most of your commercial industrial customers, it will go down. But for those properties, those customers that have a larger meter, they're going to see an increase. So, and again, if we take a look at the number of customers, I think, it's like something like 95% will see that decrease, but there will be some that will see an increase.
And just to confirm, just changing the way that we would be billing doesn't mean that there's any sort of change in infrastructure. The meters are already there. It's just how we are essentially assessing them. Okay, so, okay. And then again, much to the comments that the deputy mayor made on the wastewater side of things, should we get into the 2030s and have to contemplate on the water side, perhaps another reserve or a reservoir, that would all be funded then on the DC charge, because that obviously that's a growth related project.
Yeah, so if it's an expansion, if it's brand new to accommodate new development, then yeah, it would be funded all from development charges. If there is some sort of replacement aspect, if you're taking something away and then enhancing it, there will be some amount that would need to be funded from the rates. But no, if it's expansion for growth, then they would be paid for with development charges.
Okay, thank you very much. Just wondered if staff had any more comments, Jeff?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So one of the goals of this study was to determine what our systems were, what condition our systems were in when it came to fees and costs. And I think we believed as staff that we had a good solid system. And I think this reinforces that over the last number of years, and it goes way back to our first asset management plans in 2012, they did a good job at identifying projects over the last 12, 14 years. The other thing we wanted to identify with this study was the fairness of the system. And was because when, when these systems were started, it was a residential, and it still is a residential system. But as we've added some larger users and some users that are very much dependent on the system, how is that the fairness working out to the average residential house? And that is one of the things that was addressed with the meter size. Yes, there will be accounts that go up this year, based on the recommendations of the report. But at the same time, they are the bigger users and they are reliant more on the system. So I think that's a good point that's been brought forward. The other comments I just wanted to make is that Catherine and I both have been listening and listening to the comments that council has, and I would suggest even any comments want to be passed along to ourselves on thoughts on how or what our rates should be, because the goal here is to bring back a report on the recommendations and what we feel, how we want to move forward with this. I think this is a great base. It's grounded us. That was the one question I kept getting is what are we doing compared to our neighbors? How do we compare? And it's very tough to compare apples and oranges, but I think this actually gives us a start and gives us the confidence in what our systems are doing. Some of the stuff that here, it will get adjusted every 5 years. That's what happens. We can't necessarily predict growth, but we can estimate it. So I think as long as we keep it as conservative and we can keep going along. The last comment I wanted to make to council was I did ask for 2 scenarios. One with the plant expansion going sooner than later, because I wanted to have some sort of outside parties give us the indication of if we delayed the expansion, would it affect the rates that we're charging people? And I think if you look at it, it really comes out to not a lot of difference whether we start the expansion sooner or we start the expansion later to the average citizen in Lucan. It's the growth that'll pay for the majority of it. I think that that is the reason why I put those 2 scenarios in there. It doesn't necessarily give us a whole bunch of information with those 2 scenarios, but at least it gives us an idea if someone were to say, why don't we throw that plant expansion back 5 years? Well, here's what it would do. It really doesn't change the overall user of the system currently on the system. So those are just my comments right now.
Thank you, Jeff. One last look to council for any comments or questions. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding our the increases that we get from Lake Huron for the purchased water, do we have a forecast of that, Madam Mayor?
We get it, we get from Lake Huron, they give us 5 years of what they think the rates are going to be. And I think we are in maybe year 2 of that. I can go back and I can provide you the last what it looks like for the next 5 years. There's no increase over 5%. This year it was 5%. And I think it goes 5, maybe then 4.3 or 4.33, but there's no increase over 5% projected for the next number of years. As I say, I'll go back and get that from when that was presented to the board. And since my time on the board, those rates have never deviated from going up. There was 1 year where actually the rate actually went down from their projection.
Okay, thanks for that. And through you, I was just going to clarify whether the study incorporated a 5% or a 2% increase or something else.
So through the mayor, so the forecasted purchase water rates are included in table 1-2. I think it's page 169 of the agenda. So luckily our firm did the forecasted rates for that system as well. So we had that information. But so I think we had the forecast until 2031, 32. And then we maintained I think at the end it was a 4% increase. And so we maintained that into the last couple of years. But we've basically used the forecasted rates that were from that rate study and incorporated them into this rate study.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question, if I may. Daryl, I think when you mentioned recovering 25% of the costs through either fixed or volume, can you confirm what's the ratio there? Which one are we recovering more of the revenue from the base charge or from the volume charge? What's that ratio approximately?
So through the mayor, so you're recovering more from the base charge, that fixed charge. And I don't quite recall the exact number, but I think it was in the range of, was it 70%? It was a substantial amount from the base charge. And so that's why we figured, especially on the water side, we can keep that fixed charge the same and just change the volume charge.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much, Daryl. Appreciate all the information. And as I say, I believe Jeff and Catherine are bringing back a staff report then in December for council to consider. So at this time, thank you very much. I would ask for a mover and a seconder to just accept that presentation at this time for information, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good night. Yeah. Okay, on to our minutes, and we have a set of minutes from the November 5th meeting. If nothing needs to be amended or changed, sorry, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve those as circulated. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All in favor? That was carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. I don't believe anything has changed on that. Did council want to add anything from the last set of minutes? Okay, then we will move on to correspondence. There are a few items, or I guess there's just been one that has been pulled. This is a letter, I can speak to this a bit, from Good Roads, asking for the support of a resolution that they have sent to all of the essentially rural municipalities across Ontario for the support of an Ontario Rural Road Safety Program. It is something that Good Roads has been advocating with the province. Probably they've made it a priority for them probably the last 2, if not 3 years. I think we're going into the 3rd year. And they are working quite closely with the province and the Ministry of Transportation, but they are looking for support from communities right across Ontario as we continue our advocacy for this program. And you can read the letter there, and I would open it up for any questions. I can try to answer them. If not, certainly I would recommend supporting the motion. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, just a comment, completely in support of this. You know, certainly a good cause, and I think it's getting a lot of traction with other municipalities currently as well. So very happy to support this, and I hope the provincial government takes it seriously.
It is interesting, as they've been advocating over the years, you know, we think about, you know, the cost of a motor vehicle collision on our roads and what that means, you know, at the very minimal. But when you start looking at the circles from healthcare, from emergency services, from even in some cases having to replace infrastructure, the costs of rural road safety. And the program that Good Roads is suggesting is very minimal to our communities. Any other questions or comments? With that, there is a motion. Again, it's quite lengthy. I won't read it. Anybody interested, of course, can find it online in our agenda, but I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan, all in favor. And that's carried. Thank you very much. Were there any other items on the list of correspondence that we received that council wanted to speak to? No, nothing? Okay. Guess finally, maybe I would bring up the charge on letter that we were not successful in the application. And I think it sat there for quite some time.
Correct, Madam Mayor. The, just when you think it was dead, we get another request for some further details and you think, okay, we're still in the game here, but at the end of the day, we got the letter that we were not successful, so we will try again at some point. I'm sure this won't be the last one.
Okay, if there's no other items then that council wants to speak to, if I can get a mover and a seconder to receive those items of correspondence for information, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. On to committee reports. Blue Water.
No, I got nothing.
CEDC.
We will meet November 27th, and after that, I'll have a report for council.
Thank you. Nothing from Lake Huron. We meet in December. Fire boards, Biddulph Blanchard met 10 days ago. So there will be the minutes probably at the next meeting. ABCA.
Nothing new to report, just there's a set of minutes on the agenda and there's a meeting this Thursday.
Parks and Recreation.
Nothing to report, but we will be meeting December 12th, and I'll have a report for council after that.
Thank you very much. On to staff reports. Anything verbal or anything, Ron?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one quick verbal. We do have a deadline coming up, I believe it's next Wednesday, to make our delegation requests for the upcoming Roma. And I think it's just Roma. I'm assuming there will also be an opportunity for some ministerial delegations at the OGRA. But for now, it's the Roma deadline. So again, we have the typical ones, but I wanted to throw it out to the members of council if there was anything else that anybody thought that would be worthy of a 15-minute meeting with one of the various ministries. We will obviously hit the regular ones, which is infrastructure and finance. Again, pushing for our grant funding for the expansion to our sewage treatment plant. We have in the past approached MTO. I think we're on a bit of a path with MTO with regards to the expansion to the connecting link agreement. But again, if there's any others, whether it's the economic development or anything out of the ordinary that we're not thinking of, please be sure to let staff know, and we can certainly put those up for consideration.
Thank you. I will leave that to council to communicate then with Ron over the next couple days. Okay. Tina, do you have anything? Okay. Okay. Nothing from building. Any verbal, Catherine? Nothing. Planning, was there anything else to add after our applications that we had today? Public Works, Jeff? Nothing? Oh. Oh. Oh, okay. 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 Pardon? Okay, under council, okay, yeah, let's do that. So nothing, Jeff? Parks and Recreation, Darcy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a report about the Environmental and Sustainability Working Group. I won't get into great detail in my report. It's all laid out there, but we're just looking for council support and myself and Councilor Regan participating in the working group. I do feel there will be some valuable work being done. It's in the planning phases, and as I said, I will bring in the term of reference once it's complete to council, and if there's any other resources needed, that'll go through council. So it's just for us to attend the meetings and see where we fit in the working group. So gladly take any comments.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Darcy. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to speak to this just for a moment. So as a member of that, of the committee, the work they're doing and the ideas that they have working, and it's actually working as it was with 5 different municipalities. It's working extremely well, and I would like for council to support the attached motion. I did want to mention though that the group has actually organized a tour of the tri-recycling facilities. It's on Thursday, November the 28th, starting at about 10 a.m. It's about 2 hours in length. Anyone that wishes to attend, staff or any member of council, there's an email that I have here. I could just forward you the email, and it has all the information, contact information, dates, times, and I could send that out to you if anybody's interested. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that information, and appreciate the work that you've done so far with this. Is there any comment or questions on Darcy's report or what Councillor Regan has presented at this point? Okay, then you do have a motion in front of you that council received report PR-08-2024 as information, and that council support the participation of Lucan Biddulph in the Environmental and Sustainability Working Group. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Did you have anything else, Darcy?
Madam Mayor, through Madam Mayor, the only thing I would add as verbal is that we did have the craft show, and it was record numbers as far as vendors and participants and money coming in. So I'll have a more formal report next meeting through my activity report, but I just wanted to note to council that it was a great success and record numbers for sure.
Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to that report, and we'll do so formally, but you can certainly congratulate Abby on all the hard work that she did, because it was a great weekend. Lisa, anything for economic development?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Just want to announce that there'll be an event tomorrow at Lucan Foodland with between our Lucan Biddulph Fire Department and Enbridge Gas. So there'll be a 2 o'clock and probably will go to 4 o'clock, but the official sort of media part of it will start at 2 o'clock. And so big announcement tomorrow with Enbridge Gas, with our fire department, and the other updates that the industrial land tenders have been issued, and they are on our website. The county has posted and shared on their social media as well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. Councillor comments. Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just we received an email from the CAO that Dan was going to report to us on just to give us an update on our OLT case that we got notified. It's going to be just a later date. I guess an update on it, and then I'll have some questions potentially.
So maybe if I may, Madam Mayor, I'll frame this one up first. So we did get notice, and that's why I forwarded that notice to the members of council that our OLT appeal with regard to official plan amendment number 10, which was originally scheduled to be heard by the OLT the end of January 2025, has now been pushed back to October. Our solicitor, in recognition with the county that the rules of the game, so to speak, have been altered by the province with the new provincial policy statement, as well as some of the more detailed aspects of that. There's some planning numbers. The Ministry of Finance has new growth projection numbers that materially affect Lucan Biddulph, and the fact that the new provincial policy statement allows a 30-year time frame for growth. Those are two good things for Lucan Biddulph, don't get me wrong. But the OLT hearing scheduled for January 4th, the county is not going to have those numbers back from Watson and Associates, who are doing those new projections in time for January. So our lawyer had requested a 2-month adjournment to March. The lawyers for the appellant could not make that date, and now you see the date has been pushed back to October 2025. Again, there's limited amounts that we can say. Obviously, there's solicitor-client privilege. We're in an open public meeting, so we can't say a whole lot. But there are a lot of moving parts, and all parties continue to talk. So I do feel positive in one way, but this has been dragging on for quite some time, and it is disappointing how long it does take for this to work its way through the system.
Yeah, I guess the main question is like, again, timelines. It's funny how developers and the province and Ontario and everybody wants growth and wants, we're trying to get a sewer plant expansion. I mean, it sure would be nice to sit in front of the ministry and be able to say, we have, 8 plots of land, whatever, 140 acres, 150 acres, 120 acres sitting there that we can't move on, as opposed to complaining about the process of the appeal and how long this has taken to get here. It's just, I hear when you read different comments on the PPS, just that it's, that you can, can this appeal be thrown out? Can the applicant then just resubmit his land? The numbers, like, I don't understand, why it takes, this gentleman here earlier, I don't know, like like the projection of numbers. I mean, he just had a projection of numbers for 10 years where, like, I don't like timelines trying to get numbers. I don't know who, again, I think sometimes the government forgets, maybe whoever we're asking, we're the customer. And it just seems like we get awful service in Lucan. Like, it does seem like we're terrible. Like, we're not the poster child for bringing in land, it appears. It's, it's awful. I mean, I look at when this started in 2019, and the time that planning and our CAO and our public works has gone through in the last 5-6 years. It's unbelievable. Even council time and then reading this, this is just monkers. And it just seems like we're leading nothing. We're not leading this, and we're paying for information that we're not getting on time. And like, is anyone going to hold anybody accountable or to any timeline, or is it just seems like it's just point finger on this bad boy all the time?
So if I may, the mayor brought up a good point. Maybe this is exactly the type of 15-minute delegation that we should have with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, to say this is what happens, and this is one of the problems that we experience, and what can you as the province do to change this, to help us?
But the PPS is this. Obviously, there is stuff going, like you stated at the start of this. You can only say so much, or there's other moving parts to this PPS, and maybe we can move this forward where this won't be the new date potentially, or something. I have no idea, but it just seemed like there was more tools in our toolbox, and that is good news. The 30-year new number potentially, but so that to me, from everything you said, is the key, finding that number out. That's a very important part.
One of the keys,
but probably one of the key important parts. And I just maybe misheard you. That who's working on that, and it's going to take them to March to get it? Like, we right now have a 25-year, 20-year growth right now, because that's what we're bringing in, I believe, for our we were bringing 125 acres for our 20 years growth. So we've got that number. And how many months are you saying it's going to take somebody to figure out the next 10 years? Because we got that number.
It's Watson and Associates. It's the same company from the gentleman we had here, but this is being led by the county. So the appeal was to the county's decision to approve the official plan. So, you got to keep it in perspective here. We're not really in the driver's seat with this one. It's an appeal of the county's decision.
The number now, right now, it sounds like the next stepping stone to potential expanding or adding to our plots of land, like from what you said, going to 30 years. So when's Watson say they're going to have that? Or we don't.
Again, I don't know. That would be a question to Dirk Banner. I can ask, but certainly we're trying we are trying our best to get things moving, but again, I'm sure we're not the only customer who's trying to do this across.
No,
the
but it just
province.
doesn't seem like an unreasonable. Like it shouldn't be an unreasonable timeline for that. I just can't imagine what goes into it when you have all that information. That's, I mean. Dan, do you have, like, is there anything we can say that I can say? I can't obviously direct staff, but like that does seem to be an important part that we push for that number for, and if they can't, I don't, like, if you were doing something at your house or doing something and someone couldn't do it in a reasonable amount of time, and I don't know what the county thinks a reasonable amount of time is, I would hope they don't have a monopoly on this, figuring out growth in 10 years. I hope they don't have a monopoly. So if you guys are happy with the timeline and what they're giving you, I'm happy, but it seems like no one knows timeline and we've hired someone to do it.
Yeah, so through the chair, I can't speak to the specific timelines involved and what the work that goes into it. Obviously, there's a substantial number of municipalities that are in the same boat. And all of the municipalities in the county, as well as even the city, are currently going through the same process. The unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in with the decisions that were issued for a majority of the official plan amendments that were adopted locally across the county is that all of those official plans were adopted under the PPS 2020 guidelines and framework. But the way that clergy principle works with the province is there is no clergy. So essentially that official plan amendment now has to be weighed against the new policy that's in force and effect, which is PPS 2024. And we already know that there are certain aspects of broadly all of those official plan amendments that don't comply with the new PPS 2024 simply because some of the standards that were changed just weren't even thought of at that time. One of those being the population projections. So why are they so important? Well, population projections actually help us determine what our land balance needs are for the next projected series of time. Even the projections that the county had completed previously under the 2020 framework, which was that 25-year analysis, are now outdated because the new PPS language talks about the Ministry of Finance numbers as well as 30-year projections versus 25 years. So right there off the hop, we already know we're behind the 8 ball. We've got to go back and we've got to do the full analysis again. So unfortunately, I do understand it does take time, but we also want to get it right when we're going to the OLT to litigate these matters. So that's all I can really say in terms of more generalities. I obviously can't get into specifics.
I was just shocked at the October 20th, like it was that long. And again, that's just, so it's something that, you know, when you found out it couldn't be done in January. But when you had the October date, we couldn't have tried to get that information. So we could have continued on January 20th. Like I don't like just that long, like, you know what, if it was February, March, I'm shocked I'm just shocked. Like now it's a different conversation, I realize, but just changing a hearing from January 20th to October 20th is just, to me, mind boggling.
Yeah, so through the chair, I would just note, we were certainly not seeking an adjournment that long. I don't know where that number came from. Honestly, I was a bit surprised when I saw the notice yesterday that was issued. The adjournment in our that we were specifically looking at would align with what Ron had mentioned previously, right? So, you know, a month or two for us to be able to go through, figure out what the numbers are, and then do the actual planning analysis on the OPA and see if there is a need for us to go back, reopen it up and investigate it further. So certainly we weren't anticipating the date that was given.
Thank you.
Any other councillor comments? No. Okay, then we will move on. There's no changes to budget. Any notices of motion? So, oh, your mic. Councillor Westman?
Yeah, in my councillor comments, I did want to remind everyone that on Sunday between 2 and 4, there will be an open house at the Lucan Scout Guide Hall to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the hall itself. There'll be lots of displays and we will be opening a time capsule. Thank you.
The time capsule, yes. Thank you for that, Councillor Westman. Okay, on to the motions in front of us. So I need a mover and a seconder that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph receive the attached accounts as paid for information as follows for October 2024. $1,852,187.73. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. For the Roma conference that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorized Dave Manders to attend the Roma Conference 2025 in Toronto on January 19th to 21st at a registration cost of $670 plus HST. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. For OGRA, that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Alex Westman and Jeff Little to attend the OGRA Conference 2025 in Toronto on March 30th to April 2nd at a registration cost of $950 plus HST. Mover and a seconder, please. Our Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we have a very long motion in front of us. And again, I would encourage anybody that's watching to go to our agenda to read the full motion. I am not going to read it, but it does have to do with sustainable funding for the OPP small rural municipalities. We spoke about it at the last council meeting. If anybody wants to go back and see the discussion around that. So a mover and a seconder for that motion in front of us, Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:57 p.m. Oh, the confirming bylaw. Yes. Sorry. I'm glad that both the clerk and the deputy clerk were on it. That's right. Okay, so we do have one bylaw. And that is the confirming bylaw, so that if no one cares to speak to bylaw 54-2024 on its first, second, and third reading, that it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And resolve that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:58 p.m. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders.